All right. So, Shane, please introduce yourself, your name, where you were born, when you immigrated to Canada, and how old you are now.
Yes, so my name is Shane Torres. I am a registered social worker, and right now I am 23 years old. I immigrated to Canada when I was around 13, like I just turned 13. So it is a little bit far back, like about 10 years ago.
Right. Do you remember your first few months in Canada? Please describe them to us, your routine, your experiences, your feelings and thoughts.
I feel like my first few months in Canada was a little bit harder because I came in around like during May, which is like the end of the school year for most children in here, which is different back home because it during March was our end of the school year and then we're gonna transition. But in here, when I came in, I had to do like a sit in one of the classes, which is a grade 7 class, and it was very like a very different experience because everyone else in the class knows everyone and I didn't. So it was a little bit of hard of like in terms of adjustment, it was hard for me to kind of get acquainted with my peers and have that adjustment period. But I feel like it's because summertime is coming. I had to stick to kind of like a routine where my parents would drop me off at school so that they can go to work. And during that time, I just keep on thinking to myself that maybe this is going to be my practice. Like I can practice for the next school year so that I can practice how to kind of like speak more English with my peers. Because in the Philippines, even though like I went to a school that does teach English, it was not as widely spoken. So I had to still practice my English. So it was like a really good kind of like practice for me during my first few months in here.
Right, right. So, yeah, so you mentioned you talked a little bit about having to adjust to I don't know to the environment and to the schedule, etc. How did you were young, you were 13 years old, you were a teenager. How did you do that? How did you cope with that?
I feel like during my time and in terms of me adjusting, it really did help a lot with kind of planning out what my schedule is going to be because I'm the type of person. I feel like that's what you call like a type A, where I really like to kind of plan and write down, okay, this is the things that I needed to get done. And these are like what I'm supposed to be doing throughout the day. So during the time that I was studying or I was entering grade 8, the following school year, I was really into kind of like writing down all the things that I have to do, which is not a lot. It's like compared to like I think the education system in like the Philippines and in here, students here are not like as overwhelmed in terms of like their learning. There it goes mostly by their pace, and it's like a little bit more of like a smoother in that sense. I was like very surprised about that. So that adjustment I think really allowed me to kind of like step back a little and like think more about, okay, my academics is okay, but how can I improve my social interaction or like my social life with my peers? So I was like a really shy kid. So getting out of my comfort zone, I really did try to kind of interact more in terms of like joining a lot of clubs, like joining sports club and even joining like if they have like lunches, like school lunches and whatnot, I would volunteer to help out in those just so I can get closer to my peers and like practice more in talking and like being social with other children in here.
Wow. Well, you are indeed type A.
Yes.
But okay, so do you remember your okay, so in terms of you planning your social interactions, wanting to immerse more and have more friends, did you also get any help from, anybody, any organization or anybody, to help you navigate the new environment? And how was it?
I feel like I did not get that much in terms of like support. Um, I did not grow up or I did not move into like the part of Canada that is there's a lot of newcomers coming in. It is like a kind of like a smaller town compared to like Toronto is. So it's in Hamilton. So there's not a lot of newcomer families that are in there. It's so I had like one ESL teacher when I was in grade 8. And in that ESL class, there's only me and another kid. So there's only two of us that I can have like that interaction with. And she's not even Filipino. So it's like also hard to communicate with her. So I feel like in that sense, I did not get that much of like um, social service or like communities like support in that regard. But as soon as I kind of like move into high school, I was a little bit more adjusted, and I was able to kind of like seek out community services on my own. So in my high school, I tried to reach out to the Y, the YMCA, which is one of like the organizations that I've used to volunteer for. And it's really like a really good experience to kind of just like have myself be integrated into like the community a little bit more in that regards. So yeah, I feel like volunteering and kind of like I had to seek out my own resources in that regard.
Right, right. Um, so did that experience actually lead you to your profession right now? So tell us about your profession and how did you get there?
Yes. So I am a social worker by profession. And yes, I would probably say that like my experience as like a newcomer here and as a child really did impact like why I chose this path to be my main career. When I was volunteering for the Y, and when I was getting to kind of like know more people within like the social service community, it was really like an eye opening for me that there's so much work to be done. There's a lot that we can improve in terms of like service delivery, and there's a lot of like children and communities that we needed to really pay attention to and help out, which is why I was inspired to kind of like take the path to be a social worker and help those communities and just really it might sound a little bit cheesy, but kind of like do make a difference in regards to like what my experience was, and like having to kind of help more people and not have them like trying to seek out the resources by themselves, and so that they wouldn't have to feel alone in like a country where they're probably new or are just trying to adapt to.
Right, right. Tell us also about your path, in getting there. Like, so you went to university. How did you get there? Did anybody help you navigate also the, education system, how to choose the right program, how to choose the right university, etc., and also in terms of financing your education? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, so I would say that like my university experience was not the easiest at all. Um, I was raised by a single mother, so in terms of like finances and whatnot, it was like a really tight budget for us for me to be able to go to university here in Canada. So when I was in high school, originally I was thinking of either going to college or like maybe working first and then pursuing my studies. Um, but during those times, I was also thinking that maybe I can find a way. Like, there's always a way that I can kind of like spin this. And like, there are a lot of organization, as I have known, that are willing to help. So during my high school, um, I ran into like a church community group where they do have like a scholarship program and sponsorship program for any low income families that are trying to send their kids into university or college. And it so does happen that um, one of the ladies who is actually running that program is my mom's like my mom was taking care of her mom, like she was kind of like the PSW for her mom. So I asked her about the program and maybe how can I apply to this program because I needed help with like the financials. So she told me about how like she helped me in like applying for the program, and she became my kind of like reference or sponsor within that program, which is how partially I funded my um university career. I also did apply for OSAP, and I got academic bursaries during my time in university. I would say navigating OSAP alone and like applying to universities is very scary because no, I didn't know anyone who had applied to university before or have like applied to OSAP. So it was like a completely foreign concept to me that I would have to take a loan or I would have to ask money from the government to be able to fund my studies. Um, so when I was navigating like the application for OSAP and application to like the universities, I have to really rely on the peers that I have who had like other family members who have gone through like the application process. So I have peers who have like their parents who previously applied to like university or college or have gone through OSAPs. I would ask their parents and I would be like, hey, can you like maybe clarify for me like what this application says or like what does it entail in that regard? So I had to kind of be more proactive in terms of like asking more questions and really taking down notes on what am I supposed to be doing and kind of like just going for it, I guess. So most of the time when I was like doing my applications for um, universities and when I was doing my OSAP application, it was mostly just by what I've heard from like what my peers have told me or like what their parents have told me. And then I just followed that. And I would probably say it is a hard system to navigate, but it's not impossible to do so.
Wow. So resourcefulness and being proactive, right? I think those were
Yes.
your two key elements there. Okay. So what do you like most about being a social worker?
I feel like what I like most about being a social worker is the connection that you make with people because you're really integrated into the community and people welcome you into their homes and into their lives. And you're sharing kind of like such intimate relationship with people, but like in a professional way, which is which is like a really kind of like foreign dynamic to me to think about at first because in the Philippines there's no I don't think I've ever encountered a social worker in the Philippines. So like it's not like a common concept to me when I was growing up. So whenever I tell people now, like even with like my own relatives and whatnot, that I'm a social worker, they're like, not entirely sure, I guess, on what I do because whenever they think of like a social worker, they only think about like in the Philippines we have like the Department of Social Welfare. I think that's the first thing that comes into their mind. So it's not something that they think of. So but yeah, I feel like the intimacy and like the relationship and the rapport that you build with people and you get to learn more about like what their stories and what they've learned from their life is really something that I really enjoy.
Do you remember your happiest day at work? Could you tell us about it?
I would probably like happiest day. Mm, there's a lot of like happy memories in my career, but I feel like one of the ones that kind of stick out to me is when it was after my undergraduate years and it was my first year working as a social worker. I had to help a family, like a newcomer family, to um, do a whole process of enrollment and registration in the new school for the two boys that they have. And it does so happen that the school that they're going to go to is my former school. So it was like very nostalgic, like going through like the hallways that I've been to and like talking to like my former teachers and like um even like the principal that we've talked to was my former principal when I was there. So like they do recognize me and it was like I don't know, it's like it's happy memory, but it's also like so inspiring to me because I've got to see like, oh my God, this is how far I've come. Like it used to be me that was in their shoes, but like now I'm the one helping them in terms of like assisting them in like actually getting into a pathway and navigating this pathway. So it was really I think that's a really good experience for me.
Right, right. So you came here when you were 13. So you lived, I don't know, like less than half of your life, first in the Philippines and then now here. Do you like living in Canada, or what do you like most about living and working here in Canada?
I feel like yes, I do like living in Canada. Canada has a lot to offer. Like there's a lot of opportunities that it does offer to people, and I feel like one of the greatest thing about being here is having to kind of like experience that multiculturalism that we have, because there's so many like newcomers, there's a lot of ethnicities, there's a lot of like cultures that you can explore and kind of know more about, which is, I think, it's just like a really um good experience for people to have and for people to see how rich and like how um how it kind of plays out that like everyone is equal. Like those type of qualities, I think, is it makes me feel like more at home here in Canada. So yeah,
Great. What do you like the least about your profession?
I feel like what I don't like the least, aside from paperwork, because I have to do a lot of paperwork, I feel like one thing that I'm still kind of like trying to navigate around is that there are a lot of like policies that I might not agree personally, in terms of like holding me back from like fully and holistically helping people. But I still have to follow those policies because those are policies that were put in place by either funders or um, yeah, and I think just like having like sometimes it could be that again there's a lot of I think hold back from like funders on like what you can and you cannot do. So I feel like it really limits us in terms of like what we can do for the community in that regards, and having to kind of always push back and try to find a way around that so that I can fully help the person and advocate for them is something that I kind of don't like at times, but I do get that it is something that we're supposed to have like those boundaries in place as well.
Could you give an example, Shane?
Yes, sure. So I feel like one example that I can think of is um, there are certain programs that, for example, if you're not a certain status in Canada, so like let's say if you're not a permanent resident, or if you're not a like a government assisted refugee, or if you're not under a certain immigration status in Canada, that we would have to kind of turn you away from these services, although you might still need the services, but we cannot technically help you fully because our funders would not allow us to. Like our funding is for this certain specific type of um, immigration status, so we have to kind of like stay within that to reach like the quotas or target that our funders put in place. So it's holding us back because there are more people who would greatly benefit from these services, but we cannot service them due to those restrictions.
Right, right. I agree. Right. So, Shane, you are a very young professional. You're just starting in your career. But so far, what was the greatest challenge you experienced in trying to get to where you are right now? And how did you overcome it?
I feel like the greatest challenge that I had to kind of overcome in starting out and kind of getting into social work is, aside from like my funding my post-secondary education, would be creating connections and like having that connections to get into like the agencies and like trying to find jobs in terms of that, because I didn't know any social workers. Again, as I said, like social work is kind of like more of a foreign concept in terms of like within the Filipino community, I guess, and also like within my own family or where I grew up in. So it was really hard to find a connection and like network with people who might have the same experience as me or who might have the same identity as me in terms of like trying to get tips and advice on me, what can I do, like what should be like a good advocacy for me to kind of like start on or build on. and like having that guidance or having like a mentorship is something that I feel like I had to um, really try harder in terms of seeking. So one thing that kind of helped me overcome that is really broadening my scope of like where I'm looking at in terms of like mentorship or um, connections. So before, when I was still an undergraduate, I was mostly thinking of just like maybe I can find a social worker in like my area that I can connect with and have like kind of like the same experiences or identity. But it was very limited and I did not have a luck in doing so. So I broadened my scope and I tried to look for like social workers that are like in neighboring cities or even like further into Toronto, and to find someone who can kind of like help me get connected within the community. And that's how I found out that there was actually a network of social workers and social service workers and community workers. Um, and it's called the PhilCan association. So it was really great to find that. Um, and I also find out about the Pinoys on Parliament, which is a leadership conference for young Filipinos and professionals who are trying to network with other people, which is really great. And it helped me in trying to get myself be more integrated into like not only the Filipino community, but also within the social service community.
Right, right. Great advice. Share with us your thoughts on fulfillment and success. What is success? How do you measure fulfillment and success?
I feel like I'll be honest, I still don't have like a specific definition of success for myself. Um I think it might have been because like I'm younger and I don't have I still wanted to do a lot with my life, that like success for me is still, I don't know, like it's still kind of like a vague term for me in terms of like I've never really sat down and thought of, wait, am I successful or am I not successful? Like I haven't had that moment to kind of like think about that. But I feel like fulfillment is when you're able to just like help other people. For me, that is really fulfilling. So for me, as much as I think about like what fulfillment means, it's just meant that if you're satisfied with what you're doing and if you're happy with whatever profession you are in, that is fulfillment.
Right, agree. Do you have any advice to young people wanting to also become a social worker?
I feel like one advice that I would tell people who wanted to be social worker is that you have to be in it because this is your passion, or you have to really be passionate about it because it's the type of work that's not like you're not going to have like an easy pathway, or you're not going to have like one linear pathway to going through it. You'll meet a lot of people that does really need help, and you'll meet people that would probably like emotionally exhaust you at some point, and you have to be tough and like learn how to kind of like navigate that and set boundaries for yourself so that you don't get exhausted as well, because when you're exhausted you cannot help people or you cannot assist them when you yourself like you're burnt out, right? So I feel like one thing is, one, take care of yourself and always think about like self-care and have those boundaries in place. And two, if you're really passionate for it, you'll find a way. You'll always find a way if you're passionate about something.
Agree, agree. Thank you, Shane. Beautiful. All right.